Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about a recent confirmation coming from the Israeli army, confirming that these people kill everyone inside of Gaza, including innocent civilians. This was published by Haaretz. I also wanted to talk to you about the escalation coming between Israel and Yemen, the exchanges that were very intense in the past couple of days between Israel and Yemen, and where that could lead to, in addition to the latest talks coming from Israel about threats from Egypt, not just Jordan, Egypt as well, danger from south, and the coordination coming between the Iranian side and the Egyptian side, alongside Turkey as well. I'm going to start off with this article here. It was initially published in Haaretz, and it was some of the details were quoted in many other websites as well. Hundreds of Palestinians indiscriminately shot dead by Israeli soldiers in Gaza kill zone. Now, this kill zone is the Netzarim line. The Netzarim now is a massive base in the central part of Gaza, dividing or splitting Gaza into two. Israel started off with a very limited base with locations in the central, eastern, and western parts of Gaza to prevent people from going back to the north if they fled the north to the south before. Now they're, of course, implementing or have been implementing the general's plan in North Gaza, which is full-blown ethnic cleansing to get rid of all of the population. And now more statements are coming from people within the army. More and more statements coming in, people confirming that they are killing people indiscriminately in those areas. And they describe this as an actual kill zone. Anyone who comes to the area is shot dead indiscriminately. Then this, several soldiers, they told Haaretz as well that the killing was random. Their aim was to kill people randomly. They brand everyone as terrorists, and anyone who enters gets shot. According to them, they were competing between themselves, units within the genocide army inside of Gaza. They were competing who kills more, shooting and laughing. They found it funny. Anyone who challenged the soldiers or the commanders and said, well, look, this is an unarmed person, how comes we're hitting them? They would be like, there are no innocent people. Everyone is a terrorist, so you need to kill all of them. In one instance, they shot a 16-year-old with a hail of bullets, shooting and laughing. In another case, they gave a list, because they need to give lists of everyone they kill inside of Gaza, of over 200 people, 10 of which only, again, according to them, were Hamas. They could not prove that anyone else was Hamas. And even the 10, that would be in question as well. But we're talking about 95% innocent civilians, which is really and truly a very close image. I mean, it might be even more than that when it comes to Gaza, where the majority of the people are innocent civilians being killed for fun when it comes to the Israeli army. These statements coming from the Israeli divisions fighting in Gaza, including Kfir division and other divisions too, have become more of a norm inside of Israel. There has been a big development and big shift when it comes to the Israeli coverage of what's happening in Gaza. The previous Israeli defense minister, Ya'alon, called what Israel is doing an ethnic cleansing. And he didn't take it back, despite a lot of pressure on him to take it back. No, we're not committing ethnic cleansing. But more and more people are comfortable in admitting that what they're doing is ethnic cleansing inside of Gaza and a genocide. And that's important for at least, some in the Israeli society and the public opinion, because for a very long period inside of Israel, it's as if the population was completely blinded by what's happening. No one would say anything about any person being killed. There were suspicions, within Israeli society that, oh no, the Palestinian people, they even fake their deaths when it comes to the images that we're seeing circulating all across social media with a case of genocide that is being live streamed for the first time in history. So there is a change, and also this is something to apply pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. We are close to a period where, again, we might see a ceasefire soon. More and more talks about a ceasefire. Nothing has been confirmed yet, but reports from every single side are confirming that there's an advanced stage of a ceasefire. And there's more pressure internally on Benjamin Netanyahu to accept a deal. As a matter of fact, a large chunk of people, well, also politicians too, and political parties inside of Israel, they are calling Netanyahu to have an all-out deal, not even a phased deal, which is the thing that he's most likely going to when it comes to the ceasefire. That was the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about, in the last couple of days, there were intense blows between Ansarullah and Israel. Israel targeted key infrastructure areas inside of Yemen, including power plants, 2 power grids, and Yemen responded, well, as they have for a very long time, with continuous ballistic missiles and drones on Israel. And today, they confirmed, Ansarullah, that they targeted the Ministry of Defense. The leader of Ansarullah, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, said, we targeted the Israeli Ministry of Defense in conjunction with the aggression against the US, against us, excuse me. We will continue the escalation, and we do not care about the enemies. Ansarullah made several statements when it comes to them targeting Israel and this whole fear from Israel. One of the people who actually made statements when it comes to that was called Al-Bukhaiti. Al-Bukhaiti is a spokesman in the political side of Ansarullah. And he made a couple of statements in relation to Yemen targeting Israel, because many people were telling them, well, how are you targeting them now? They're targeting infrastructure in Yemen. He said, no, we actually reassure, firstly, our brothers and sisters in Gaza and in the nation altogether and all the free people of the world that our attacks will continue. Our attacks will continue until the genocide ends and the siege is lifted off Gaza. Our battle with them will continue until the end of days as well. Our position is moral and religious. The material losses are incomparable to the divine punishment if we do not take action against this enemy. And it doesn't matter how much power the enemy has, God's power is greater, and we fight in his path. We rely on him in this struggle, in our fighting, and we do whatever we can. Simple, plain and simple from their perspective, This is what we believe in. This is our moral compass. This is our faith. And we fight. Simple. We don't care about Israel, and they do not scare us. We would be scared if we don't take action from the punishment that we would be receiving if we were silent. Plain and simple when it comes to Ansarullah. And in many cases, sometimes it's very refreshing to see, such honesty coming from these people, which leads me to the actual activities that happened from Ansarullah. So they had a statement. They had a couple of representatives speaking when it comes to the actions against Israel. And they also published a few videos too. Firstly, Yahya Sariya, he confirmed that, we carried out these attacks, strategic locations in occupied Jaffa, and we will continue to do so up until the genocide ends and the siege is lifted. And here we have the moment that the missile was landing. So clearly, no interception when it comes to Israel. They usually intercept these with Arrow 3, the hypersonic exoatmospheric anti-aircraft system, or air defense system. One missile costs approximately 3 million, but they couldn't do anything this time. And this is also a live image of the moment of landing. And there was a fair bit of damage too. And again, no interception from Israel. This has been a very significant landing, by the way. And Israel always, of course, tries to downplay it. They don't even report many of these landings in many cases. And they focused only on their attack in Yemen, where they had a significant attack on the Yemeni infrastructure and power plants as well. However, in Yemen, they confirmed that very shortly after the attack, there was the electricity went back to normal to all of the provinces inside of Yemen. The General Electricity Corporation announces the return of electricity to all governorates, which means, okay, it was an attack on a strategic location, but at the end of the day, the service continued and people still had electricity and energy. But the thing is, why are the Israelis now attacking Yemen? And of course, we had Abu Ubaidah as well. He congratulated the Ansarullah, saying that they are our real brothers. They do not stop, and we asked them to continue up until the Zionists stop the genocide and lift the siege of Gaza. But why is Israel now escalating in Yemen, and do they have a plan? Well, it seems like Israel is on a massive intimidation campaign against not only the countries of the region, but the people of the region, everyone globally. Israel is on a massive campaign after they have been humiliated on a military level with the resistance and the internal damage and the economic damage that they are facing due to ongoing attacks from the Palestinian resistance, previously from the Lebanese resistance, and the fact that one of their main ports in Eilat went bankrupt because of the embargo of Ansarullah from the south, including continued attacks on strategic locations inside of Israel, such as main and key strategic military bases and energy fields in certain cases as well. Israel wants to regain that image of the power in the Middle East, the main and strongest country in the Middle East that can dictate how things happen and where things go to. However, so far they only carried out 2 to 3 attacks on Yemen, despite Yemen attacking them day in, day out. In many cases, we have daily attacks from Ansarullah, whether it's drones or hypersonic missiles. And the attack of Yemen coming from Israel is a very difficult one, by the way. 2,000 kilometers. It's a very long range. It has a lot of risk factors involved too. and it's ineffective. It's ineffective because they do not stop the attacks against them. I mean, 14 months with a full-blown destruction and genocide in Gaza did not stop the Palestinian resistance. Likewise, in Lebanon, they could not stop the attacks of the Lebanese resistance up until a day before the ceasefire took place, with over 300, some reports said 500 missiles launched on Israel. And they wouldn't be able to do that with Ansarullah. But what Israel is interested in doing is embedding, having this fear embedded in the people of the region that, no, we have the final word, and anyone who attacks us is going to be punished. But Ansarullah told them, no, we don't fear you, we fear God. That's what they say. And we will continue to support the Palestinian people up until the genocide ends and the siege is lifted. So there's a big campaign coming from Israel to try and gain back the momentum and this tarnished image and the lack of intimidation and the fact that they have become a punching bag and no one is really caring or worried about their responses and willing to sacrifice. So it's against Yemen, it's against Lebanon, it's against Syria, it's in Gaza, it's in the West Bank. They're warning, they're escalating, everything. But it's not only against them, it's also against Iran. And not just against Iran, it's also against Egypt. Senior analysts are talking about, military analysts inside of Israel are talking about the next evil may come upon us from Sinai. That's a guy called Alon Ben David. He's one of the main military analysts inside of Israel. Eyes south. The next evil may come from Sinai. Before we enter into a friction with a new adversary, we need to look at the big picture and not ignore the rising forces in the Middle East. This is something that, well, we've been speaking about this from the beginning of the genocide and how Israel views Egypt, despite the fact that Egypt did not participate in this and did not take nowhere near enough action to stop the genocide in Gaza that's happening next to them. However, despite all of that, Israel still views them as a threat. Bezalel Smotrich previously said that Egypt is a participant in the 7th of October attacks because they enabled Hamas. And well, Israel and its main allies, the Genocide Coalition, could not force Egypt to completely open the borders to allow a mass exodus of the Palestinian people, where Israel could have gotten this over and done with when it comes to the population a very long time ago. There's an argument when it comes to the resistance, but when it comes to the civilians, and then Israel would completely block the borders and not allow them back in. However, we also had articles from, well, previous figures in the Israeli Military Intelligence Directorate. One of them was a specialist in the field of infrastructure in the Arab world, talking about the massive tunnel network inside of Sinai that's preparing to attack Israel, and confirming indirectly in that article that I shared about a year ago that no, Egypt has strategic tunnels inside of Sinai. They go against everything in the peace treaty that we have with them. And as a matter of fact, they've breached every line of that peace treaty. And they deployed so much forces and heavy artillery and equipment in the Sinai Peninsula. All of that is going against the peace treaty that we have with them. This needs to be a demilitarized zone. And now Israel is escalating against them and are escalating against Jordan too. There have been many talks in recent days about risk when it comes to Jordan. And there were reports of Israeli figures meeting in Jordan, supposedly worries about Iran participating in Jordan too. And this is coming simultaneously, well, with coordination. Iran and Egypt discussed collective action against Israel. They met in Cairo. There was a meeting for the D8 member states for coordination, strategic coordination, and strategic partnerships too. And there were meetings between the Iranian president and the Egyptian president and the Iranian president and the Turkish president as well. And they spoke about all of these things. Now, mind you, when it comes to, for example, Iran and Turkey, they have a strategic council together. And Iran and Egypt have been developing stronger ties. Before, it was a no-no when it comes to Egypt having any sort of ties with Iran, by the way, primarily due to American and Israeli pressure. Well, American pressures that is Israeli-led generally. However, even the countries with governments that are traditionally aligned with the United States, there has been a shift. There has been an undeniable shift. Again, despite any valid criticism you can have of these countries when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. What's happening in Gaza should have, raised alarm bells, and it requested action from many countries from day one, not even from day two when it comes to the genocide. However, in the bigger picture, there are definitely coordinations, and these people, they're not naive. They're reading what the Israelis are saying. They're reading what the Israeli media is saying, and they understand what is being prepared for them too. And although they have a level of strategic region when it comes to that, they need to be prepared. And the past 14 months proved that you're prepared if you have the force. If you don't have power, then you're ill-prepared. No, Israel does not really go against countries that have proper military. Israel is an expert in cowardice bullying against, some resistance movements and innocent people. I mean, even if you talk about it in Gaza, just against the civilians, really. This is how they fight, because they're cowards at the end of the day. And they lack that will to fight, and they're struggling. That's why they're struggling when it comes to the military. But when it comes to countries with actual armies, no, they bear that in mind, and they take it into consideration. That's why their attack against Iran, it was carried out from the Iraqi airspace, where the United States had, freedom of maneuverability in that area. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, I already mentioned it, but an increased coordination between also Turkey and Iran. Turkey and Iran, they also had a meeting on the side of the D8 summit too, and they spoke about Syria. Pezeshkian, he met with Erdogan and Sisi too, talking about Syria's territorial integrity, and the Israeli aggression against Syria, with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is now the key player when it comes to Syria, undeniably. Turkey has become the key player when it comes to Syria. They're having a lot of advancements when it comes to the northeast. And their coordination with Iran is very important, would be very important. I mean, the fact that they have already coordinated with Iran before the operation to take down the Assad government indicates that there have been understandings between the two parties. And now the fact that they're also meeting again face-to-face and confirming the continuation of their strategic relationship is exceptionally important. They just recently signed a deal worth $90 billion for the coming years when it comes to trade. Now they've been already good trade partners for a very long time, but strategic does not only mean trade and economy, and both Turkey and Iran are coordinating at very high levels. And the fact that there is at least coordination, by the way, in the West Asian/North African region between Turkey, Iran, and Egypt is exceptionally important. If there is a trio, and again, it would be very difficult to combine these three countries and, let them accept one way or everything, agree on everything when it comes to, for example, foreign policy or what have you. But the fact that there is coordination, and strategic coordination is exceptionally important, very, very important, because you have Egypt, which is the biggest country in Northeast Africa, key player, massive army as well. Turkey likewise, and Iran as well. And it would be very important to continue that strategic relationship and nurture it as well when it comes to the three countries. Now, when it comes to Iran, they are more liberated from US pressure. When it comes to Egypt and Turkey, there is a level of US pressure undeniably when it comes to, well, their foreign policy and what happens inside the region. Well, that's why in the past 14 months, the only country in an official state that actually attacked Israel was Iran. Egypt had things, but they were quickly diffused. There were altercations and confrontations between the Egyptian army and the Israeli army in Gaza approximately 3 times, and soldiers were killed in these confrontations, by the way. But both parties agreed that they would not publish too many details about them so that they do not escalate the tensions, because they did not want to have an all-out war together. And again, of course, any criticism is completely understood when it comes to that, but the fact that they are coordinating is highly important, and this coordination has to continue because it can help at the end of the day the people of the region and also the Palestinian people, undeniably, if there is a good level of coordination between these countries to especially apply pressure on the genocide state. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. And let me open the space up for you. See if you have any questions, and welcome everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. And if, by the way, anyone has any questions, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, you can share anything from now. Something like a red emoji or something. And welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And Koopa Koop, thank you so much and congrats. Thank you so much, my friend, and everyone in the live stream. Okay, let's go back up, see if you shared anything from the beginning. Jack Ayub, Saudi Arabia, the worst in Turkey. Is the plan coming? True. So they can run a pipeline to Europe, undercut Russia. What do you think, Brother Muhammad? Well, I think the pipeline is, well, primarily Qatar, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, as far as I understand. And yes, to be an alternative for Russia as well. But don't forget, if also Russia, now they're interested in making that very quick, by the way, because Russia is due to, well, listen, either we have a World War III or we have a de-escalation. There are talks about a de-escalation, and there have been elements of de-escalation. But, well, if Russia ends the war with Ukraine and you have a peace treaty there or a ceasefire, then there's an argument that the pipelines to Europe could work. I mean, the European countries, NATO member countries, were acted in an exceptionally stupid manner, by the way, when it comes to the war in Ukraine, because they've harmed their own people with their actions against Russia. Despite the fact that they didn't even lift a finger, or, you know, some of them didn't even criticize Israel with crimes that have been committed far worse than those of Russia. And of course, there are different arguments anyway when it comes to Ukraine. But yeah, I think that's already developing anyway. And, well, the fact that now in Syria, you also have a new government that is completely allied with Erdogan and is looking to have a strategic partnership with them and a defense pact too, potentially, that would mean that would be very quick. But at the end of the day, talking about a mega project, a very large project too, and I think it will be implemented at the end of the day. And thank you so much for that, my friend. And TMZBGD, is there any news on the ceasefire negotiations and any news on True Promise 3? Yes, I have been trying to give you as much as possible when it comes to the details or the most relevant details about the ceasefire in the past few days. And I believe that there are talks, there are very intense talks to reach a ceasefire. And we are in an advanced stage from reports coming both from Israel, from Palestine, from and from the mediators, from Qatar, from the United States too. There are indications that there is a very, very advanced stage. We're in a very advanced stage of the ceasefire talks, but no one can say anything so long as it's declared. There were periods before where we were in a very advanced stage in the ceasefire talks, and then Benjamin Netanyahu eliminated everything and he went and escalated. This time it could be different. And again, I'm not trying to be optimistic or pessimistic here. I'm just telling you what I can see. This time it could be different for various reasons. Number one, well, 14 months on, Hamas is still wiping the faces of the genocide soldiers in Gaza in the mud, right? They are eliminating them. In Jabalia, today, the Palestinian resistance, they had an ambush against genocide soldiers. You know with what? With a knife. They didn't have to, but they were in such close proximity that they took a knife and took 3 people. One took 4 people down, stole their weapons, and went away. Yesterday, sniping someone. The day before, an ambush against 25 genocide soldiers. Listen, they can't defeat the Palestinian resistance. They can't defeat them. And they can try and act. Israel can try and act as much as possible as if, things are normal and expanding and we're going to stay here and, kill more infants in Gaza, attack more ICU units and hospitals. But it's not going to stop. Simple. Netanyahu has more pressure than ever. He is wanted now by the ICC. The corruption cases already started against him. And people are seeing an example of a ceasefire in Lebanon, a fragile one, but there is an example of a ceasefire in Lebanon. So you've had much less attacks than before coming from Lebanon. And people want that in the south too. Especially seeing as, well, this is not bringing results. You're not bringing the people back, the prisoners of war of Israel. And the more time they spend in Gaza, the more likely that they would be killed by the Israeli strikes more than anything. So there is an advanced level, we're in an advanced stage. But again, no one can confirm anything up until we have a confirmed public ceasefire agreement. And in relation to True Promise 3, yesterday I spoke about True Promise 3. The Iranians said, oh no, it's definite. True Promise 3 is definite. Now, remember before I was talking about Iran using the lack of response as leverage to apply pressure for us to reach a ceasefire. That happened in Lebanon. Iran is giving it probably more time to work inside of Gaza and to see where things go. Now, mind you, everything can get out of hand. Everything can explode. But again, you talk about what's actually happening. Iran is seeing a ceasefire in Lebanon, albeit a fragile one. They want to see if it can work in Gaza. If it can work in Gaza, maybe they'll give it a bit more time. Iran doesn't have a problem waiting. Iran, well, the ball is in their court. They're using that leverage now of not responding. Some people can criticize them for saying, well, lack of responses before led to another escalation from Israel. That's correct, yes, but Iran is a strategic player and they're a very calculated player as well. They know how to play. They take their time. They're in no rush and they're under no pressure from even public scrutiny when it comes to what they need to do, what they believe they need to do, and the time it needs to be done in. Especially when your enemy is trying to drag you into response, right? Because the best time for your enemy to strike is when they want you to strike. But Iran will decide, no, when we want to strike and we need to make it shocking and it needs to surprise them and needs to be very effective. Now, regardless of a ceasefire or lack thereof in Gaza, I think that's coming. The only thing that could make a difference is potential, like the previous statement coming from the Iranian President Pezeshkian, if the genocide entity, starts to behave and stops murdering children, we might consider the level of our response. So that would be something to consider. If they do not de-escalate, do not reach a ceasefire, that's why they started talking more now, to kind of push for an actual ceasefire, let it be public. Because people need to remember, Iran and the countries of the region, they're not interested in war, they're interested in stability. The Palestinian people, all they've been asking for is their rights, is their basic human rights for 76 years. It's as simple as that. The warmongers, the genocide cartel, the depraved criminals, it's Israel and its backers, the United States and the genocide cartel. But Iran, no, they want peace in the region. They want stability. It's U.S. arrogance and many of the Western countries' establishments' arrogance against the many of the West Asian countries that, they caused the wars. Right? They caused the wars and then complain about waves of refugees in Europe. Don't stop causing wars, right? But I think all options are open now. I mean, personally, I would hope to see a ceasefire, primarily for the people of Gaza. They need a ceasefire, and perhaps through some sort of pressure. Because don't forget, ceasefire doesn't mean the ending of the battle or the ending of the campaigning, the ending of the activism. There is no way on earth anything would stop now. Israel is a genocide, apartheid, racist, supremacist entity that must be dismantled. Israeli apartheid must be completely dismantled. The struggle to dismantle that Israeli apartheid will not stop with a ceasefire. But I think a big problem is that many people, they like to view it as either all out or nothing, all or nothing when it comes to the immediate immediate accomplishments or immediate results. That usually does not happen like that. And many things need to be factored in, including global players, their internal problems, their regional problems, and the way they are dealing with other countries globally. All of these things need to be considered. I hope that was brief and sufficient for the MZBGD. Thank you so much. Valentinuzzi Spinelli, do we agree now that HTS had help from Zionists, or at least to the point was to cut the supply, or any closer to that understanding? What I would say with regards to HTS, and my view is primarily led from the things that I see on the ground, is a little bit different than what many are describing when it comes to HTS. There have been, and will be many question marks surrounding, for example, the history of this organization and its leaders, and scrutiny that needs to be there for everyone, really. But there is no denying that the takeover of HTS during the campaign deterrence of aggression, right, to take down Bashar al-Assad's government, that was a government that committed lots of crimes despite the parts of their foreign policy that were in favor, at least circumstantially, when it comes to the resistance. It has been very, very rapid, very quick. There wasn't a lot of bloodshed involved. And all of this drama and massacres and sectarianism that everyone is talking about on social media, many of them are showing us videos from 10 or 12 years ago. And many people are asking, if people were like that before, can they change? Again, to that, I personally would respond, look at what they're doing now, right? Because, the argument that's coming from the people who supported Bashar al-Assad is, they're tied with Turkey. Turkey is tied with the NATO. Turkey is tied with the US. Turkey didn't cut the supply of Israel, for example, during the war in Gaza. And they're all together in this. However, what we're reading now on the ground inside of Syria indicates clearly, to a level that leaves no doubt, that there is a friction and that there is a confrontation between Turkish interests and US interests inside of Syria. and American interests are in line with Israeli interests. Turkish interests are not necessarily in line with American and Israeli interests, particularly, by the way, with Turkey's biggest problem inside of Syria, which is the YPG or the SDF. They consider that as a big problem. And I think describing them as Zionists, for example, or agents of Zionists or whatever, I think that's I'm going to try and be as easy as possible here. I don't think that's very accurate, so to speak. And also, when it comes to Israel, you need to understand the statements that they have against Syria. And when it comes to the people of Syria as well, don't forget that in Syria, we've been talking about 14 years of civil war, right? We weren't in Syria. And of course, people had different opinions, and their priority is to build their state, to have recover from everything, to rebuild. Israel already destroyed everything when it comes to the military. There have been reports now that Assad actually handed Israel all of the details when it comes to his military and bases inside of Syria, so that they do not target him when he was fleeing, so that it can still be protected. And I think everyone should view personally what's happening in Syria from really a bigger lens. Some people are looking at it from one point of view, just to prove a point or protect an idea. I think it's important to read things from the ground, look at the videos that are coming from Syria, and don't listen to one or two people online, including myself. Look, don't listen to me with regards to Syria. Don't listen to me. I'm sharing my opinion because, many people said, how comes you have that view on Syria? I have my view based on what I see, and I'm truthful to myself and I'm truthful to my audience. I think it's much more complex than what people would like it to be portrayed as for their own interests. I don't know what their own interests are. Some people, they might simply have that opinion. I don't know. Or they might have other interests. I don't know. But from my perspective, I read everything on the ground and I base my opinion and share it based on that. And look, I think in Syria, we're going to be looking at a location where we will see ongoing tension now, because there are two ways ahead. A diplomatic solution that would be achieved when Syria has more power and leverage, primarily if they would have, for example, a strategic or a defense pact with Turkey. Then Israel knows we're dealing with Turkey here. We're not dealing with, a random state. And that's why, by the way, the United States, Israel, and many Western countries haven't really recognized the new Syrian government yet, right? Because they would like it to be war-torn. They would like everything to become sectarian and bloody. They would like there to be no central government. This is something that, well, the Syrians do not want primarily, and neither does Turkey, which was the main country supporting them. And Turkey had millions of Syrian refugees for all of this time who are slowly returning back to their country. So I think, bearing everything in mind, first and foremost, the human rights situation inside of Syria, what the Syrian people need in their day-to-day life, the rebuilding, the healing, the building of their country, their institutions. And then from a wider perspective, when it comes to Israel, which is an enemy of everyone, really. Israel is an enemy of Israelis. Israel is an enemy of the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Syrians, the Jordanians, the Egyptians. And Israel is an enemy of humanity at the end of the day. That state needs to be dismantled as an apartheid state. It's doing no favor to anyone. People need to understand that. And it's important to read everything from a horizontal with peripheral vision, so to speak, to try and understand that this might not please everyone, my opinion, and that's totally fine, no problem. But I hope that clarified my point. And I'll, of course, keep talking about Syria and everything that's happening there. And Valentinuzzi, thank you so much for that. Let's go to your next question. Gulliberg is asking me an interesting question about Oman. What is Oman's stance? Are they under Western influence? I'm curious. My father is working there now. Well, listen, I think the thing is, when we say under Western influence, I think countries globally try and influence each other. There's undeniable extra influence coming from the United States, right? But Oman is a country that is very peaceful. The people of Oman, I've heard nothing but good things about them. And also, they always take a peaceful role in the region. They have been very vocal about the rights of the Palestinian people. They have mediated, they have participated in mediation brokered by China between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Again, something very important. And they always look to stabilize the situation. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people, and beautiful food too as well. So although, of course, they have ties, undeniable ties with like the US and you know, many countries across the world, but they generally have a foreign policy of, you know, keeping the peace between everyone without that preventing them from saying things as they are. So you will see them being very vocal about the case in Palestine, for example. And yeah, I think if your father is working there, he's enjoying his time, and he's enjoying great food as well in Oman. And Rick, thank you so much for that, my friend. Peace and love to you and everyone in New Zealand. And France, thank you for that. Again, another question about Syria. Is it true that in Syria women are being made up to cover and not go out alone? Again, look at the situation in Syria. No clips from like just one or two clips from social media, right? I shared some pictures, right, of women protesting, right? Christians, minorities, right? In Syria, everything is normal. Do you know what I mean? The representatives of HTS went and visited the bishop of Aleppo. Christian priests, Orthodox Christian priests in Latakia were participating in protests. You know, no one can deny these things, but again, one of the problems is when it comes to any of these things is the fact that we have feeds online, right? So we have our interests, we have our opinions. And usually the feeds, whether on X or YouTube or Facebook or what have you, they will show us what we want to see, okay? So again, you know, and I'm not saying, listen to these people. Of course, if there are concerns and human rights abuses in certain cases, not good. No, everyone would disagree with them. But also, is that a representation of the reality in total, generally, right? And again, no one has the right to say, oh, I'm Syrian, I know everything about Syria. No one has the right to say that. Likewise, with any Palestinian, no one can tell you, oh, I'm Palestinian, I know everything. Because with the millions of them, every one of them will have a different opinion, right? So what's important is, again, go and see every single news outlet, reporter. Unfortunately, there aren't many English-speaking reporters from inside of Syria. By the way, that's a problem. Many of the pro-revolution, right, or anti-Assad Syrians primarily are active in Arabic. That's a problem, by the way. And for some reason, some of the Syrians who I also spoke to, who are, you know, who have more audiences in the West were pro-Assad, to say the least. And that's, again, a problem because Western audiences are subjected to that opinion, right? Especially when we want to talk about it in the, you know, if we want to say the fans of the resistance, for example. Right, I think there's a lot of misinformation being pushed out there, and it's important to keep an open eye and not restrict yourself to one source of information. Not myself, not one other person. Right, you need to do your research. You need to do your due diligence. From what I have seen in Syria, again, this campaign has been, well, one of the least bloody takeovers in just 11 days. You had another party completely withdrawing, president who many of his fans describe him as the president of the resistance, not firing a bullet and fleeing and lying to his closest people inside and fleeing the country by deceiving them, by the way. More reports coming of his betrayal and his dealings with Israel. And of course, there's no denying of the crimes that he committed. I mean, I personally never denied his crimes, and I was never his fan anyway. But when it comes to now, you need to read everything that's happening. You need to read everything from multiple sources to get a better picture. And again, you know, I think the unfortunate thing is that some of these voices are directly serving the sides who they claim to be fighting, right? Who is it serving now to say, oh, Syria is led by this and that? What are you trying to justify? An Israeli takeover? And then they're claiming that, you know, we're anti-Israel and anti-US and what have you. Again, view things from a wide perspective, have different sources, and also see what's happening on the ground. And also don't forget the Syrian people, because that's the primary thing about Syria. Not the geopolitical scope of everything. It's mainly the Syrian people who have been living under nothing but authoritarianism. And you have seen, well, you might have seen, well, the interviews with some of the detainees who were held in Sednaya. People completely losing their minds, being imprisoned for decades without knowing anything. People thinking that Saddam was still alive, right? So I hope that clarifies. That was from Francis Fitzgerald. Thank you so much for that. And Glenn Hoxley, thank you so much. And Sharbil B, thank you. Thank you very much for that, my friend. Much appreciated. Said so many people think that Syria was the death of Palestine, but it was just a sign of the end of empire. Congrats, 100K, well deserved. Thank you so much, my friend. Listen, I have a view that this change inside of Syria has made a massive shift in everything to do with the region. And in many cases, it is not as what is described by the prophets of doom and gloom. And again, when you look at it, you would need to have an approach where you would still have criticism, reading reality appropriately, things on the ground, having an open mind, not being emotion-led, and also not being an ideologue. The problem is if you're an ideologue, some people, not you yourself, of course, some people just want to prove a point when it comes to Syria. You can't do that with Syria. You need to read everything as it is. And you need to compare previous years and previous actions with now. I mean, we have seen things that were undeniably atrocious inside of Syria, both from the supporters of Assad and parts of the opposition. And another argument is, well, this opposition that took certain measures before, right? Primarily, if we want to talk about ISIS, for example, was planted there to harm all of this change, right? But again, what happened. Look at what's happening now. And also diversify the sources of information when it comes to Syria. Christopher, great call on the Israeli spies Iran had operating in styles of the genocide. You told us about this a week ago. Any more info on this? Seems TP2 targets were selected with this knowledge. Yes. So today there was a report in one of the Israeli media outlets saying how Iran invaded Israel. They're calling this an invasion. I'm not sure if I saved that article, but they call this an invasion when it comes to Israel. No, I don't have that article actually. Anyway, what they're saying is the fact that Iran managed to have so many networks of spies inside of Israel proves that we have actually been already invaded by them. And that's very problematic. And the thing that I mentioned before is how symbolic it is that Israel can actively have rings of spies within Israel. From firstly, Israeli Jews, number one. Secondly, from multiple backgrounds. Thirdly, different age groups, and male and female. Age range from 18 to 75. What does that all tell you? That there is a massive lack of trust and lack of faith in the central government. People lost faith in everything in Israel. They lost faith in this whole facade of a Jewish state. They lost faith in the government, in the army, in the media. Anyone with an ounce of brain, they lost faith in all of that. And now that's being translated with what? With the fact that they are putting more faith in Iran than they do in Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran, the country that Israelis are told day in, day out that they are the biggest enemy of Israel, right? So I think that's very significant. That's a very significant thing, by the way. And what they also revealed, by the way, in that article is the fact that some of these people were operating for Iran before Operation True Promise 2, sending Iran sensitive information about strategic locations inside of Israel that were targeted. These things are very serious, right? And at the end of the day, Iran would need information from inside of Israel too, and not just rely on intel or, GPS. Antithesis: do you think Turkey will eventually use its troops to force Israel out of the Golan Heights? That's a very interesting question. I think what Turkey is trying to do and what the Syrians are trying to do now is establish Syria as an official state. HTS, the ones who led this campaign, the deterrence of aggression, are calling everyone to hand in their weapons to the Ministry of Defense. The first group to hand in their weapons would be HTS. Why are they doing that? To tell the whole world we're no longer a country full of revolutionary or armed groups or militias. We're a state. That's the first thing. We're a state of law, state of institutions, and you deal with us as a state, right? Despite all of that, by the way, the US and many countries are not accepting them. They're not being, they don't want that. They want civil war, and they want sectarianism, and they want blood. And that's why I always say the people who call themselves pro-resistance, they don't serve the purpose by how they're portraying Syria, not for the sake of the truth and not for the sake of, well, the enemies of Syria and the Syrian people. Then, if they establish themselves as that, clearly they've been taught by the Turks. There's an undeniable influence and guidance from Turkey when it comes to Syria. Right? This change of a Shara al-Julani and the approach and everything, all of that is catered by Turkey, undeniably. Why? So that Syria can become an official state. They can then have defense pacts and agreements. Let's say in several weeks' time, that's it. Syria declares we have a defense ministry and we have a defense pact with Turkey. Okay, beautiful. Turkey, no one, Turkish army is no joke. Turkey has a massive power, and they would have a lot of leverage. Now, would that be sufficient? Would that be enough if Syria has a defense pact with Turkey that both countries could use diplomatic leverage against Israel simply due to their physical power to gain political results? That's a possibility. Will it happen, or will it definitely succeed? No, not necessarily. But it's definitely a possibility that cannot be ruled out. Why? Well, look at previous situations where Israel dealt with a country that has force, concessions, right? However, Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel in general, it's undeniable that Israel is an expansionist, colonialist, supremacist entity, and they're trying to translate that in Syria. And they will do whatever they can, right? But if we reach a level where pressure can be applied, that could be an option. The second option is, well, warning with war. Do you think that Israel, do you think that the Syrian people will be comfortable with the idea of Israel occupying territories like that? Of course they won't be. And at the end of the day, if you would talk about a country with a military, with the defense pacts, then you'd be talking about something far bigger than what they can imagine. And also, things could be far worse. We could have a situation where there wouldn't be a defense pact and things would go wrong and Israel would occupy Syrian territories. All of that can happen. Absolutely. But people need to realize something. Don't let that distract you from the fact that Israel is not a stable country in 1948 occupied territories. People need to understand that very well. Israel is shaken to the core. There's a reason why the Israelis have been saying we've been living in an existential threat for the past 14 months. And all of their actions are there to have damage control and reverse the effects that have been inflicted on them and have some sort of an image of victory. People need to understand that very well. Occupying Syrian territory. Again, did you fight someone occupying Syria? You're using a case where you have a massive transition with people without an army even, and you destroyed everything, and then you're occupying territories. Okay. Well, you occupied certain territories in South Lebanon, and you were withdrawing from them. You are in Gaza. You will be withdrawing from Gaza. And eventually, apartheid will collapse from within. People need to understand that very well. Apartheid Israel will be collapsing from within. It's not about if, it's about when. Israel as an apartheid, genocidal Zionist entity is doomed. It's on its way to collapse. The question is when. They are trying to prolong their life as a neo-colonialist, racist, Zionist entity. They can try as much as they like. They have been buying time for a very long time, by the way. But there's so much time they can buy. They will be expelled completely from the region. The Zionist entity, as it exists in its form, will be eliminated. It's just a matter of time. And they're trying to, have all of these campaigns to show the people that no, we're the reality and we are the new reality and we will expand further and we will take over. We'll take over what and who? You've had peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan for so many years. Did the people of Jordan and Egypt have peace with you? Of course they didn't. Well, and also, what kind of message are you sending the Syrians now, right? Because Israel had dealings with parts of the Syrian opposition before. Those parts of the Syrian opposition, because the Syrian opposition isn't one, it has many different factions. Some of them, Israel was helping them, and they were saying, oh yeah, we will, no problem, we'll have a peace with Israel as well. Israel is losing them by what they're doing in Syria. So for their arrogance and for this campaign that they are trying to portray themselves as the everlasting power in the region, they're harming elements that used to have a peaceful tone with them inside of Syria even, right? Because there are voices in Lebanon as well. Don't forget, some voices in Lebanon are calling for a peace with Israel. But who's going to support that now? That's the question. Who is going to support any prospect of peace with Israel after what they've done in Gaza? The only way that anyone well, morally should or could potentially have any sort of peace with Israel is if Israel dismantles itself as an apartheid entity. If Israel all of a sudden becomes a one state, a one democratic state with equal rights between the Palestinians, and the Palestinian people are granted their historical rights, refugees are allowed to return, compensated, and everyone is viewed in equally between the Jordan River to the sea, fine. No problem. But so long as they are an apartheid entity, they are doomed to fail. It's just a matter of time. So it's not just the Golan Heights, it's Haifa and Yafa and Sdud and Asqalan. And also, Glenn, we said thank you, and Koopa Koop, of course. JD as well, thank you so much. JD, you said, I'm so proud of Syrian people, and congrats. Thank you so much, my friend. And Alessandra as well said, good evening. Thank you very much for your amazing. Thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. Let's go to the next one. I'm lagging behind here. Jimmy, congrats, Mahmoud. Thank you so much, my friend. There is a possibility Trump may pull our troops from Syria, as he was hinting around it recently that happens. Do you think Turkey would let Syria have their oil? Listen, Trump previously pulled troops from Syria. Trump, in his recent speech that I shared yesterday, when he was talking about Turkey, he was, praising Erdogan, saying that Erdogan is a smart guy, but that Turkey did an unfriendly takeover in Syria. There's an undeniable clash between the US and Turkey in Syria, whether you like Erdogan or the Turkish government or not. There's a clash. There's an undeniable clash. Now, from the tone of Trump, well, firstly, he was saying that I'm going to end wars, I'm going to end everything. And he's been confirming that our military is exhausted, whereas the Turkish military isn't exhausted because they didn't go through all of these wars that like we did. There is no real willingness. So all of these things indicate that, yeah, they will be eventually departing from their bases inside of Syria. Now, how likely or how quickly would that happen? Especially seeing as the Zionist lobby will still have influence with Donald Trump. And the Zionist lobby and Israel, they don't have an interest in the US withdrawing from Syria because they know that would be a Turkish takeover. And forget about everyone who's telling you Turkey is friends with Israel. Turkey is not friends with Israel. Yeah, they might still have deals, and you can criticize them about the fact that they still supplied oil and expected oil. All of these are valid criticisms. But you can't say that they are like friends and mates and all of that. That's not the case. There are genuine hostilities between the two countries. What Turkey has been doing, not only with the Palestinian resistance and the support of Palestine, but internally as well, inside of Israel, are things that Israel does not appreciate. And if all of Syria would be influenced primarily by Turkey, well, the first thing that one would say is that the future of Syria, we would hope and we would like it to be led by primarily Syrian interests, regardless of Turkish interests or anyone's interests. But, well, no one can deny that without Turkey, they wouldn't have accomplished what they've accomplished, right? So therefore, Turkey would play a big role. And there is, of course, the historical dealings with Turkey, the fact that they took so many Syrian refugees, millions of them. They handled the most when it comes to the civil war inside of Syria. People shouldn't be forgetting that. And that wouldn't be something that's good for Israel, by the way. It's not going to be something good for Israel, because when it comes to Syria, well, they would not be a member of the NATO, will they? If they're not a member of the NATO, they are an individual country, and they supported by Turkey and other countries too. What, Iran opened the gate of communication with them, right? Didn't they? Didn't Iran communicate with HTS? Didn't Russia communicate with them? Didn't Iran just confirm the embassy will be working? Read everything that's happening in Syria, right? Without this doom and gloom approach. It's not in the favor of the US. It's not in the favor of Israel. But, well, we're living on a barrel of TNT in West Asia, aren't we? And things can deteriorate very quickly. However, based on, Donald Trump's statements and what's been happening for the past couple of decades, I don't see a future of US forces in the region. I don't see that. They will try and extend that period as much as possible. But look, you need to justify your presence. The question is the American administration justifying the presence of 750,000 US troops in over 700 or 800 bases that are only known to us in over 120 countries? Is that justified for the American people and the American taxpayer? I'm sure most Americans will say no, that's not justified. Trillions being spent on pointless wars and aggressions abroad and illegal CIA coups and all of that. I'm sure most people won't agree with that. So it's difficult to justify it. It's difficult to justify it. And I don't think it's going in their favor, by the way. And JD, thank you so much as well. And also Stephen Keller saying, will the Turks move to Syria to take on Israel? All of that, again, firstly, it's way too fast to talk about that now, judging by what happened in Syria. But all of that is absolutely on the table and will be on the table. Turkey and the new Syrian government, their main priority is unifying the majority of Syria, all of Syria, under the administration, right? Under the new administration. They're still doing that with the Northeast. There are indications that they will be successful. The United States backed forces are receding. They're facing internal problems with both with the Kurdish and Arab population in the Northeast. If all of that is done and we have a central government, everyone belongs to, all of the arms belong to the government, everything belongs to the central government, Syria is for everyone, then they can focus on the bigger threats. That scenario of Turkey with Israel fighting inside of Syria, that's a definite possibility, that it cannot be ruled out. However, again, look at how Iran, the only country that hit Israel in its official stance, right? Apart from, of course, Hezbollah, Yemen, Iraqi and Palestinian resistance, of course. But Iran as a state, did Iran try to achieve its objectives politically before hitting Israel? Did they? Or did they not? Of course they did. And when did they attack Israel? When did Iran attack Israel? When Iranian sovereign territory, or what Iran deems as a sovereign territory, well, according to international law, like the embassy in Syria, and then the attack inside of Iran, they responded. So Iran didn't respond to help or to stop the genocide, by the way. Iran participated because it was attacked. Everyone needs to understand that. Now, with Turkey itself, or any other country for that matter, by the way, they will not attack Israel unless they're attacked by Israel first. But Israel is already committing an aggression against Syria. Not a small aggression, a massive aggression against Syria. Right? And the question is, what can Syria do now? If they reach a level where they have a Ministry of Defense and they have a defense pact with Turkey, where Turkey can arm them with anything they like, then we can start talking. We can start talking about certain things being implemented inside of Israel, or inside of at least the occupied territories in the Golan Heights. Because don't forget, the Golan itself was occupied for 57 years. All of that was under Bashar al-Assad and his father's rule. No one went and liberated them, by the way. And the people who are now calling and telling HTS, oh, look, they're not fighting Israel because they occupied, they were not telling Bashar al-Assad and his father, go and liberate the Golan Heights. They were saying Syria is not in a position to attack Israel, weren't they? Although they had fighter jets and they had missiles and they had air defense systems, right? Let's not forget that. That's for the people now saying, oh, HTS are not attacking Israel. You were bringing every excuse under the sun to tell Bashar al-Assad, don't attack Israel, it's not the time. You know, they have an excuse. There's internal problems. Their military is not enough, and Israel can wipe them off, right? And we're not going to get into too much details because there's a lot to talk about. But a conflict is undeniable, and there is already a conflict internally inside of Syria between Turkey with the SNA and HTS and the US and Israel. That's already there, because do not exclude what's happening in northeast Syria from Israel. Israel has a major interest in keeping the SDF in northeast Syria. And they speak about it clearly. And their communication connection with movements like the PKK and other movements in the Kurdistan area, undeniable. Some of the movements, not the people, of course. There's no talking about the Kurdish people are part of the region and part of the history of the region. They are a natural embedded part, and a very important part of the region, who had exceptionally important historic events and people with historic events in the region. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was Kurdish, let me remind people. It's important to highlight these things because some people think about you talking about the actual people. No. We're talking about some of the movements in those regions. Israel definitely has an interest with them. So do not exclude northeast Syria from Israel, because northeast Syria is in Israeli-American interest. America's just taking the lead. Why? Because, well, it's not the first time in history that the United States is, fighting on behalf of Israel. We know that by now. Stephen, thank you so much for that. And JD, thank you. Let's see if we can take a couple of more questions. TMZ BGD, currently what does the day after look like for the Palestinians if the ceasefire goes through? Primarily relief. That's number one, relief. And I think the sense of relief for the people in Gaza will almost be utopic. I know that might sound bizarre, but these people have been suffering so much, so the idea of a ceasefire would put them over the moon. That's number one. Relief, healing, getting all of the aid in, food, nutrition, healthcare, rebuilding, field hospitals, tents that are better than what they're in now. They're in the cold with water under them, people cold and hungry, up until the rebuilding starts. And that would be amazing. That would be very good for the Palestinian people. Now, the ideal situation would be, again, assuming we would get into a ceasefire, would be a long-term ceasefire with the momentum of stripping Israel, the genocide, Zionist, ethnic cleansing state that has been committing all of these crimes, continuing the campaign to strip the legitimacy of apartheid Israel up until it dismantles its apartheid. If that can be done, perfect. No bloodshed, no more wars, no nothing. All it takes is simple international diplomatic action, similar to what they've done with South Africa. Boycott, divestment, sanctions, and a threat to use force to dismantle the genocidal psychopaths. How can you have a psychopathic, genocidal maniac brutally, sadistically killing people around him to roam around like that? You know what I mean? So that would be the ideal thing. And would be good for everyone. It would be good for the Palestinian people. It would be good for the peace-loving Israelis. I'm not sure how many of them, but there are definitely some of them. But and those who don't like it, they can bugger off. They can go where they came from. But Palestine needs to be a state where we have equal rights. But so long as the apartheid regime is there and it's being backed by the United States and many governments that still support it and legitimize it, you would continue the conflict and the risk of that escalating again. But what I can tell you is that the talks that are happening, by the way, the talks that are happening include, although it's not being made public, include long-term deals. And again, long-term deals can be broken, but long-term deals, because after all of this, they would not want to get into square one. No one would want to get into square one. So let's see if it passes. Let's see if the last details, the niggly parts are solved eventually, and we have a declaration. That way, what would we establish? That, well, Hezbollah had a ceasefire with a confirmation that Gaza will get a ceasefire within 2 months, because many people are criticizing the Lebanese resistance. And that would also mean that, well, we eventually reached a ceasefire without dismantling the Palestinian resistance, without all of that. And although Israel tried to, by its genocide and mass destruction, create a new reality where they would kill the spirit of the people before they kill them physically, including everyone observing from across the world, kill you mentally, by saying, well, look, we can destroy everything and everyone. What are you supporting? There is no Palestine. There is no Palestinian people. No, they kill you mentally. This is what they want. All of that would fail. But the momentum against Israeli apartheid would and should continue up until it's dismantled, up until apartheid Israel is dismantled. And Zionism is out of the way, because Zionism is a racist, supremacist ideology that should not exist, and it should be illegal. What do you mean, having an ideology where I am better than you and I can kill you so they can submit to my will? What kind of garbage is that? And then you have people trying to make it illegal to criticize Zionism, right? No, Zionism should be outlawed. It's a racist, apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing supporting ideology that should not really exist in the 21st century. Now, again, some people might still believe that, but they should not be in power. It should be made illegal for people like that to be in power. And I think the past 14 months raised a lot of questions in the minds of people globally, especially those living in countries blatantly supporting, right, this depraved entity, like the US government, like the British government, like the German government, like other government, blatant support. Like, what the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? So the momentum should and will continue, in my opinion. I mean, what has been done in the past 14 months is not something that can be erased in a matter of a day or two or a couple of weeks. That is not going to happen. That is simply not going to happen. Abna Dalil, when Hizb sacrificed Lebanon for Palestine, you condemned the Lebanese who spoke against them, but you condone HTS not wanting any enmity with Israel while they want enmity with Iran. Hizb. Interesting question. Firstly, I absolutely condemned any person who criticized the Lebanese people, the Lebanese resistance, from supporting the people of Gaza. Absolutely, they did the morally right thing and they did the morally correct thing. Secondly, condone. I do not condone HTS. I never said I have, and I never said I will. The only difference I have with HTS in Syria is that I might have a different view than the other common view that you might be hearing out there. Secondly, there are indeed strategic differences between HTS and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the biggest paramilitary slash non-government army in the world, with an arsenal of hundreds of thousands of strategic missiles that can and did eliminate parts of Israel. Do HTS have that? They did not have that. Secondly, HTS, and again, that's not in favor of HTS. I'm telling you the facts on the ground. HTS were their operations in the past 14 years, and their this evolvement from one movement to another, did that primarily target and position themselves as a movement to target Israel or to target Bashar al-Assad, who they've been fighting against? Target Bashar al-Assad. They took over Syria with the Toyotas and AK-47s. They won't be going to Israel with Toyotas and AK-47s. You need a different type of strategy dealing with Israel. Israel is a different country. It's a different army. It's a different calculation altogether. That's not to justify lack of enmity with Israel. No, Israel is the enemy of everyone. That's very clear. But the difference between, and plus also, don't forget, the HTS were fighting Hezbollah in Syria. Hezbollah were criticized heavily for participating in Syria, regardless of how, it was labeled initially, including their previous Secretary General, Subh al-Tufaili, who was the Secretary General of Hezbollah. He criticized Hezbollah when they participated in Syria. He said everyone who goes and fights in Syria goes to hell. He even reached that level. However, there were others who said, no, the argument is this, and the other people who are coming, they want to butcher everyone in the country, and therefore it was justified, right? And then everything became clear, and now we saw everyone changing their tone, right? So there's a difference between them. And again, I don't condone them. I just have a different observation of the situation in Syria. I think it's way too early to make decisions or, saying you support this or that. It's way too early before you see things getting evolved. Because the way, in the case of HTS, the way they have changed some parts of their origin, all of these things, there should be questions, of course, and you need to treat things in a very careful manner. But there's a difference between condoning someone saying, oh no, I support them, absolutely, they're amazing and what they did is right, and then saying, actually, no, the situation isn't as the pro-Assadist prophets of doom and gloom are describing it to be in Syria. No, I do not view it that way. This is not the information that I'm getting from the ground, with the recycled videos and this rhetoric of doom and gloom. I don't view it that way. So I hope that clarifies. And even with regards to the enmity with Iran and Hezbollah, Al-Julani himself, he said, we are open for strategic relations with Iran so long as they do not interfere in the internal politics of Syria. And you're talking about a country who many Syrians consider to be, Iran, many Syrians consider to be a big part of the problem, because they participated with Hezbollah in Russia, according to them, the way they view it, against the Syrian people, not just against militias. The pro side would tell you, no, they were only fighting militias. Other Syrians beg to differ. They would tell you, no, I'm sorry, I have a different view. Yet, despite all of that, HTS told Iran, no, we're willing to open a new page. We're not looking for, revenge with anyone. And we would be looking for strategic ties. Otherwise, why would they still have an embassy in Syria? Have you asked yourself that question? Why would Iran start legitimizing HTS all of a sudden, calling them armed resistance, not armed opposition, not terrorists, likewise with Hezbollah? So the change here came from the people who were actually fighting them. First and foremost, inside of Syria. This is what many people don't like to, either they don't want to see it, or I don't know, they have a different kind of idea or concept. All of a sudden, Iran calling them armed opposition, Hezbollah the same, talking about the future of Syria. Yeah, a couple of criticisms here and there, but again, what other argument can they have? If they are these evil people who came and slaughtered everyone, then that would be Hezbollah and Iran directly contradicting themselves. Well, why did you neglect then Syria, right? But again, the situation is evolving. Things have moved fast very quickly. It's important not to jump into conclusions and not condone anyone. In the meantime, just have an open eye, open pair of eyes, really, still have peripheral vision about everything and reading the situation. Okay, let's see if we have a couple of more questions. And Sarajevo, 1984, Sarajevo, thank you so much, my friend, much appreciated. And your daily inspiration, thank you so much. I'm not Muslim, but I watch you all the time. Thank you for actually balanced reports as well as exposing the hidden lies. Thank you so much, my friend. Much appreciated. And everyone else who sent supers. Okay. Okay, let's take the last one from De El Sendero. Mahmoud, how did the events in Syria impact the ceasefire negotiations between the genocide state and Hamas? I think they were totally separate. I don't think there was any relation. There was a path of negotiations between Israel and Hamas for 14 months, ever since the war began. Well, the Israeli genocide. And then there was a temporary ceasefire, and then there were talks. There was a period where Hamas said we're not participating, but they sent representatives. And then they reached different stages. So it's a path. It's not as if, all of a sudden something happens and then we have a ceasefire. No, it did not impact it. It's the path of negotiations is a separate path to the developments in Syria, who really surprised everyone. And this ceasefire that we might have is a result of all of the talks that have been happening for such a very long time. And the fact that there are confirmations both from the Palestinian side, the Israeli side, and the mediators as well, indicating all of these developments. And that has happened before the events took place in Syria from over a month ago. I used to tell you that things are changing. There are indications. Bit by bit, things started to become more and more obvious what's happening. And then it led to this situation. And I hope that clarifies. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you, everyone who participated. In 1984, Sarajevo, everyone who sent supers. Your daily inspiration, Marvin Vergas, Muhammad Sayed, Alessandro JD, Glenn Hoxley, and Koopa. And thank you, everyone else who sent questions and participated in the conversation and the chat. And of course, apologies due to the time restriction. We can't reach all of you. I'll hopefully be with you soon with another video. Live streams, it depends on the availability, really. But you will see notifications anyway. Keep your eye on the notification tab and the community tab as well. In the meantime, again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon. in the next video. Peace, everyone. Take care.